Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us back here at Fuse's channel. We have another special guest for you guys today. Now, we've talked to Mark, we've talked to Robert. Today, we're sitting here with Carl Anthony, the business development manager of Fuse. We're going to dive into his past a little bit and talk about his role. Carl, how are you doing? Are you ready to get into it?
Well, good, Michael. Thanks for thanks for covering all the guys from Fuse before with Mark and Robert, and keen to give my piece as well.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, so let's dive in a little bit. Tell me how you wound up in this space in the first place, about some of your previous successes and the story that got you here today.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey, right? So I like my brother actually got me into this space in around 2012. I remember we were, back then it was not as ubiquitous as it is now. Well, people think there's still a barrier to entry, right? But back then it was crazy. Um, our our coins that we were buying at the time, our bitcoins at the time, we exchanged cash. I think it might have been only in 2012 actually. I always forget. I have to double check that. But we were exchanging cash for USB sticks, right? So we were giving away cash, we were getting USB sticks. So you roll it back all the way back then, and it was kind of crazy. And it was always kind of fun, and kind of the meetups back then. And, we're London based, but the meetups back then were a far cry from the kind of events and conferences that we have now. But I was predominantly working in corporate during that period, and I've always had corporate roles working at some tech companies. I had some roles at Google, was contracting there, and then I was also working at Samsung for a while. And Samsung, I was particularly focused on kind of business development and channel development as well, which we can get into a little bit later as to why that's super relevant for this space. I have to say that around the ICO time, I wasn't completely enthused with the space. I didn't feel, I felt IPO, ICO, it wasn't really for me. But the DeFi side of things, and I felt like this was closer to the kind of centerpiece of what the industry was about. That the DeFi side of things, with this high level of accountability, but incentives for taking risks and this kind of element. I personally, that came to my ethos, and I really enjoyed that. And then, as I began to progress and I ended up with Fuse, what was fantastic about coming to Fuse was that we were looking to make not only give people access to these sort of tools, but actually soften the kind of barriers to entry, reduce the friction. And we do that with that mobile technology part of that. So super enthused to be with Fuse, and super happy to be talking to you about this as well.
Wonderful. So let's dive into that a little bit. First and foremost, so you got into the crypto world largely as a hobby and enthusiast, kind of so to speak, while
Oh, for sure,
working
yeah.
in the corporate world. So like then as you brought your talents to Fuse, is there any big differences between being in a crypto project versus the traditional corporate world from your perspective? And do you think being in the corporate world really helped bring a lot of like concrete ideas to crypto companies? Because in crypto, it's not often as solidified, correct, in terms of processes and so on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, freedom of thought, I think, is first and foremost the element that's there, right? So this is a hyper collaborative, hyper growth industry.
Mhm.
In a lot of corporates, it's become very specialized. I think this is the best way to put it, right? If you guys or any guys girls go to conferences that are out there, and you just have a conversation with anyone and anybody who's there. One, you're going to find that everybody is super smart. Like everybody has something to give. Everybody is just super contributed to the space. It's amazing. Secondly, everybody is super open to collaborate, and everybody's openly talking with each other. It's not you're not uh, you're not trying to snipe with each other. It's not too transactional, and this is where I think it differs from the corporate world. A lot of those industries in the corporate world are not bad mouthing. Of course, it's giving me a lot of space as we go through.
Yeah.
Um, but in the corporate world, you're in a position where a lot of these markets are a lot more matured. So there's this tendency that you have to compete for market share, or the market is not growing as it was.
Yeah.
In this market space, we've got thousands of percent of growth left to come in here. We've got millions, billions of users, millions in the short term, but billions over the next 5 years to come into this space. Um, Not any single one chain is going to be able to manage that as they come through. It's more of a load balancing exercise, right? Interoperability is the future. We preach interoperability, and so it's just fantastic that you can openly collaborate with people. You can have this very free and open conversation. You always find a project to work on. People will always, if you don't have something that doesn't mean anything, you can always find someone else who can work with you. And you kind of grow together in this space, and that's what really brings me here. The energy's here. The weirdos are here as well. It's just
Agreed.
a very fun space to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. As I was just, I guess, most recently at Bitcoin Miami, and yeah, yeah, I didn't meet a single person. I didn't have a very constructive conversation with. Everyone was there, as you said, working in the space in way, shape, or form, and they all had good insight into all sorts of different industries, and it was really interesting. So, what do you think it is about this industry that makes people so hyper collaborative? Because it doesn't have to
Oh,
be that way, but it just kind of became that way, right?
yeah. I mean, I just think firstly, like I mentioned before, it's a hyper growth industry. There's so much growth left for everybody. Not you don't have to snipe over market share as it was. So this part one, that's kind of more of a material part of it. But secondly, I think that from an ideological point of view, a lot of people there's a lot of energy around this. I mean, I speak to some friends often that from more that were more the open source Web two, Mozilla and this kind of
Mhm.
stuff back in the day, and they're often now thinking to themselves, I want to get into Web three. I want to be where the energy is. I want to be in that space where everybody's energetic. And it's a challenger industry. It's a disruptive industry. If you think communications were disrupted in the last cycle,
Mhm.
uh, connectivity, the way we were connected was disrupted in the last cycle. This is a much bigger disruption, right? So this was maybe around communication, and that was actually a brand new, fresh thing. But this is a legacy infrastructure piece. Let's talk finance as a legacy infrastructure piece for the entire world. It underpins everything and anything that we do. It encourages innovation. It is the be all and end all at this point in time. Maybe some people hope it wasn't, but it really truly is. And the disruption that we're actually putting into this space is remarkable, considering we don't really have the backing, or we don't have the ironclad backing of any of the major players from an institutional point of view. Maybe now it's coming back there. Nation states were not always in the play, but through the adversity, we are here now. We are continuing to push forward, and that energy is like it's very very sticky. It brings people together, and everybody has a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, yeah, it does kind of feel like everybody's on the same team or pushing essentially towards the same loose ideals. So I
And
guess what
everybody
would
has the other thing I would say is that it's fun, right? You may
that's true.
work more hours than
Yeah,
you ever worked. I'm sure since your transition, you work more hours than you would do normally in the corporate space or anything.
yeah,
But you have a hell of a lot more fun doing it in this space, and you're always problem solving. You're always engaged. You're always looking for the new thing. There's always a catalyst to push you on to the next thing. So yeah, loving it.
yeah. I would say like often in this field, it's like what if the real success were the friends we made along the way? And it kind of largely is because the people you meet, you can form crazy partnerships with relatively quickly.
Of
But
course, yeah.
yeah, I want to pull that back then, tying on that note, back to Fuse and like for you, what was the origin for? Okay, I see this and I want to get involved with this. What was really that spark?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, if like let's draw it back and look at my ideological perception of how finance should be. I think that there are a lot of communities, jurisdictions, regions that have been left behind by traditional financial institutions.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that you begin to see that, especially with Fuse in this context, that mobile uptake has been significantly greater. More people probably have mobiles than they do bank accounts now, right? Especially
Yeah,
in underserved
they do.
communities. Um, and they need opportunities and they need ways to be able to one grow within their own economy and grow. They may potentially grow their own economy. I don't know if you ever heard the statistic, but if you spend for every dollar you spend at a Walmart, you're going to
Oh,
only get 10 cents left in your own community. 10 cents to develop that community, to have that community flourish, to grow that community. 10% of every dollar doesn't seem like it will go very far, right?
yeah.
And that's fine, but it has gone far. We have gotten a place, but maybe we can raise those numbers and like improve the local communities. Um, but if you look at now your average mom and pop store in the local vicinity, for every dollar you spend there, on average, 40 cents stays in that community there. So how do you begin to encourage that? How can you begin to incentivize that? So we have this Fuse Studio, which allows you to mint your own token in a codeless kind of way. So you could actually come in, you could start up your own community, and you could have your own, you could have your own mom and pop coin if you necessarily wanted to. You can
Yeah.
offer incentives off the back of that. I hark back to an example that we did before. Mystic Valley was a festival that we hosted in, and I'm sorry if Mark or Robert also told the same thing, but it's a fantastic example of how this works. If you go to a music festival in any way, shape, or form, you're always handing over a medium of exchange. You give your cash or you pay on your card and you get back tickets or tokens to exchange for goods and services while within the festival. Makes it a captive market. Um, in this context, the Fuse network had a example built on top of that, right? So there was a local partner in there, Betaza, who supported that festival. They forked the wallet. So there was a wallet that was in there. There was a currency for this for this festival.
Mhm.
The merchants and the consumers were all using their version of the Fuse wallet, exchanging transfers via QR code at that time.
Mhm.
And we were able to support 150,000 transactions and over $1.2 million in revenue in that space.
Mhm.
So now, if you look at traditional financial payment rails, Stripe, Visa,
Yeah.
2.9% plus 30%, 30 cents per transaction, right? It's quite expensive. If you kind
Yeah.
of work, don't get me wrong, of course, there can be like kind of bulk processing and kind of batch processing in there. It can change, but it's expensive. It's still expensive, especially for smaller businesses and smaller things.
For sure.
Really, if we just take that 2.9% plus 30 cents, that should be $81,000 that it should cost to transact. Utilizing the Fuse network, which has an incredibly low gas fee,
Mhm.
it was only going to cost. It only cost $100 in real money, right? So immediately you have a lower cost you can pass on to the consumers, and a higher profit that you can pass on to the merchants. There's like
It's a win-win,
two
man.
wins here. Yeah, of course, and that and of course the infrastructure that we have to put in play, mobile infrastructure already exists. We just ride the coattails to provide alternative payment rails,
Yeah.
and so this sense of empowerment that you can begin to give to these underserved communities and help support people in their community and their economies and grow, empowering people with just simply people who have mobiles can now become treasurers of their own community and their own microeconomies. And this is super powerful. And this is kind of the blockchain and its inclusivity and ability for people to ramp up is really important. And that's why I love Fuse.
Yeah, yeah, and by all means, that there are issues with using your actual credit cards or cash somewhere, anyways. And I prefer to do my transactions at festivals with little glass blown things like little squids or something. That's usually the currency I would go with.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, honestly, like you said, it's a win-win. And it very, very much falls in the same way a lot of things in the blockchain industry do, which is cutting out a lot of the middleman who is often just taking a large portion of the chunk of change. So fair enough. I guess now let's kind of take a gander at your role a little bit deeper. So as the business development manager, one of the things we were talking about off camera was you kind of going out into the world and evangelizing. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, recently we've been getting Fuse back on the road as the conference scene has kind of picked back up. Like I say, talking, collaborating with these people, doing panels, answering questions, informing people what the Fuse Network's about. So this is part of it, evangelizing. Secondly, I mean, it's going to sound silly, but it's the development of business on the network. So, how do we get more projects on board? How do we bring more DEXs to compete with our own native DEX? We have Voltage Finance, which is our native DEX, spun out as a DAO. We treat it as an ecosystem project. How do we get competitors to that? I'm a competition maxi. I should also point out, right? I'm really big on competition. I think competition brings out the best, and then that's where you get your true winners. How do we make our markets more liquid? How do we ensure we have the right partnerships? How do we find the right marketing events? How do we choose those? You work in partnership with marketing as well. How do you manage grants? How do you put together ecosystem funds? So all these things that kind of will help push the network forward that's been there. And do we need infrastructure, technical infrastructure, and these kind of things? So it's a broad church in the business development world. But yeah, anything and everything is to kind of grow the presence and the impact of the Fuse network. Deliver for the stakeholders that put their trust in us.
Good. I guess let me throw a bonus one at you here. Curious, is there any challenges specifically to this industry you haven't faced in any of the other industries you worked in?
Oh yeah, I mean the I'm always thinking that I'm quite quick of thought, right? I always feel like I can adapt to things as they go through, but the agility required in this industry is spectacular. One minute you're going to have to read through like super thick legal jargon and kind of move through there, and then the next moment you're trying to work out, does this technical infrastructure work for us before I waste any like valuable dev time and resource time? Before I take this to them and ask them if they want this, does this make sense? Can we put this through? Are we in the right markets? Are we supporting the token in the correct way? Is the network does it have the longevity to compete with other L1 EVM chains that are out there? I think it is the agility that is required from day to day. I say it's a challenge, but I mean, challenges are fun, right? It wouldn't be life is not fun without challenges. So yeah, I mean, it is a challenge, but it's super fun. I enjoy it a lot.
I would agree with you there and say it's demanding, but it's also largely the reason why we're here, right? We enjoy the fast-paced environment. We enjoy how it goes. 1 year in this is like 10 years in the traditional markets world. Honestly.
Yeah. No, we're all living cat years, right? So that's we're very much or dog years. Sorry, dog years. We live in dog years here. It feels crazy. The time passes so quickly, and there's so many things to do at any given moment. Yeah, so I would just say, managing everything that comes through and just being super agile, right? It's hard to say that this is your job, right? It's not that. There's a variety of different things going on there, but when you're disrupting the world of traditional finance, it's not it's not expected to be easy. It's not
No,
expected to be
it's
easy.
not. It's not. So I guess, Carl, you talked about a lot of the different concepts that you work with here. You talked about your past. Is there anything else about your role or say your perspective of Fuse that you think people need to know before we go?
Um, we're the thing. I think the thing that people don't often realize is that we are out there. We're people. You can reach out to us on Telegram or on Twitter or anything like that. We're at all of these conferences now. Is that sometimes I think people think it's just a blockchain and there's no one supporting that, but the foundation team, the core team, love to have conversations with people. Love to have conversations with people who are, who have picked up the token, or to people who are just interested in delivering new payment solutions, or people who just want to learn a little bit about blockchain or cryptocurrency or this kind of market or decentralized finance.
Mhm.
It's the thing that people don't realize is that we are available, right? Regardless of how busy we are, we're always open to conversation. If you reach out, the best way I think to go through is come to the official Fuse chat,
Mhm.
reach out to the community manager and say, hey, I was hoping to kind of get some insight or I have some ideas. There's never a conversation where I don't learn something, right? I'm always willing to have those conversations, and I think the whole team are really open to that. So we're accessible, we're out there, and I just don't think that's it's not something we market, right, but we are there and we're always having conversations. And the amount of people that I meet at these conferences who I'm super surprised who are stakeholders in the Fuse network, and I'm like, oh wow, fantastic! Like, let me tell you about these things that are coming up. Let me tell you about what's going on. These things are not there. Operationally, we're always trying to grow. We're always trying to support.
Mhm.
Um, kind of the traffic that comes on board and the growth that we're expecting and coming through. So yeah, we're available. We're able to talk to, and we're all approachable. And
Agreed.
we
Yeah.
love to talk. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm very glad to hear it. I mean, like, if you guys have been, if anyone watching this, if you've been in this industry for a while, you definitely know communities are open to new people joining. If you haven't been, I do really implore you to dip your toes in and give it a try, because there's a whole world out there of people willing to talk about this stuff with you, from community
Oh
members to,
man.
like you said, team members, man. About to say it's
The
the
only
only
thing you
industry I
the
know
only thing
like
you have
that.
the only thing you have to worry about is stopping us once we start going on about it, right? We can go on forever. You gotta remember, you gotta tell us to stop when you've had too much. That's the only thing I warn you
Yeah,
about.
fair. Also, in that same vein, if you guys have any questions you'd like to see us answer here, drop them and we will happily answer them here as well. That way, I mean, if you have a question, I'm sure 100 other people would have that same question. So by all means, please ask it. But for now, Carl, thank you so much for joining us here today. Love to have
Michael,
you on
pleasure.
again. And everybody, have a wonderful day.